Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, it is a game changer. 2 Ebola patients in DR Congo are declared cured after new drugs massively increase the survival rates of patients. The country's been racing to contain an outbreak that's killed over 1,800 people over the last year. And data journalists from the Financial Times say that Rwanda's economic miracle may partly be explained by manipulated numbers. The claims raise questions about President Paul Kagame's victory in a 2015 mandate that cleared the way for him to potentially stay in power until 2034. But first, the fight against Ebola has turned a corner. 2 new drugs have had a massive impact on increasing chances of surviving the virus. The results are so encouraging that authorities have dropped other less effective drugs currently being tested in the midst of Democratic Republic of Congo's latest fatal outbreak. Valerie de Camp tells us more.
It's a major breakthrough in the fight against Ebola. 2 experimental drugs have renewed hope that the virus could finally be contained. This after a study found 2 out of 4 treatments being tested in the Democratic Republic of Congo significantly improved survival rates among patients. According to preliminary results, about 30% of patients taking one of the 2 drugs died. If administered early, the survival rate is as high as 91%. Among people who receive no care at all, 75% die. Following the successful trial, the drugs will now be used by all patients in the DRC. They were developed by U.S. scientists and work by attacking the virus with antibodies that were harvested from Ebola survivors. The World Health Organization has hailed the trial's success, stressing, however, that the drugs would not be enough to bring an end to the epidemic. Vaccines remain the most effective way to eradicate the virus. More than 1,800 people have died in the Democratic Republic of Congo since the outbreak began in August of last year. Authorities have been on high alert in the past few weeks as new cases emerge in the border city of Goma. While efforts to control it have been hampered by militia violence and some local resistance to seek treatment as soon as the symptoms appear.
Well, doctors fighting the spread of Ebola have been highlighting the recovery of 2 patients who were given the new drugs in the hope that their story will help build trust amongst affected communities who've been suspicious so far about treatment efforts. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in the U.S. He reported the preliminary results from the new drugs on the treatment on Tuesday. He stopped short of calling it a cure, but says it is an undoubted game changer in the landscape of efforts to tackle the Ebola epidemic.
Advance in the treatment of people with Ebola virus disease prior to this demonstration of the efficacy of these 2 particular interventions. We had no treatment for Ebola. In the field, before there's any therapy, it's a disease that has anywhere from a 65 to a 70% mortality. The drugs that we're talking about today have dramatically and significantly decreased the mortality of people with Ebola virus disease. So in that respect, being the first time we've ever been able to do this, it is, quite frankly, as you put it, a big deal. It's a major advance.
So how difficult was it to come up with new drugs in the middle of DR Congo's outbreak?
Well, it isn't coming up with the new drugs. It was actually performing the clinical trial. So what we did, which was very difficult from a number of standpoints that you've already pointed out, the security being one of them, and the fact that you have to do a complicated trial in the middle of an outbreak area where you compare 4 drugs, one being a control, to determine whether or not there really is efficacy. It required a lot of coordination, a lot of bravery on the part of the people on the ground who were conducting the study because of the insecurity and the violence and the militia that are going on. So not only is it important that we now have 2 drugs that clearly diminish the mortality associated with Ebola, but the actual logistics of being able to conduct and carry out the trial in and of itself is a phenomenon.
Now, efforts to get affected communities to cooperate with treatment have been a struggle so far. So why do you think that trying to get people on board with these new drugs will be met with any different kind of attitude?
I actually think it would be quite different, because now that we know, and the word will spread throughout the community very quickly, that we do have drugs that can save the lives of people, there's been a considerable amount of distrust, both of medical and civil authority, in the northeastern part of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. People sometimes would not even go to the Ebola treatment units, or if they did go, they would wait until they're very late in the disease for fear that nothing positive would happen if you went to these Ebola treatment units, because they've seen so many people go there and die. Now that they know if they go there, they'll have access to a drug that can be life-saving, I think that's going to turn around the attitude towards people interacting with the medical authorities.
Dr. Anthony Fauci there. Well, look at some other news. The mayor of Durban and her entire team has been sacked. After a week of meetings, the ruling ANC party in KwaZulu-Natal province decided to ask Zandile Gumede to step aside on Tuesday. Gumede is currently out on bail after having been arrested earlier this year over the alleged fraud in the awarding of South African government contracts worth $14 million. She's denied those charges. Israeli billionaire Benny Steinmetz is going to be tried for allegedly paying $10 million in bribes to win mining contracts in Guinea. The diamond tycoon's denied Swiss prosecutors' charges. He and two associates allegedly handed over the cash to one of the wives of late Guinean President Lansana Conté between 2005 and 2010. Steinmetz's dealings in the country have led to corruption probes in the US, Switzerland, and Israel. And twice as many children in Mali have been killed in the first 6 months of 2019 as died in the whole of the previous year. A new report by the UN reckons that 150 children were victims of violence between January and June. Most died in jihadist attacks and interethnic violence. Researchers also warn that there's been an uptick in armed groups using children to fight. Now, data journalists from the British paper The Financial Times have turned up numbers suggesting that Rwanda's remarkable economic turnaround under President Paul Kagame may not be all that it seems. Investigators believe that some statistics have been manipulated, at least once, just before the 2015 referendum that gave Kagame a shot at staying in power until 2034. Critics say it's all part of a wider cooking of the books that donors have turned a blind eye to. Nicholas from our Africa desk tells us more about the investigators from the Financial Times' discovery.
Their investigation reached the same conclusion as a France 24 report carried out in 2015. At the time, credible sources and a whistleblower had told me that Rwanda was manipulating its statistics to show that there had been a decrease in poverty when in fact there had been an increase. And what the FT did is they asked data journalists to look at 14,000 data points in Rwandan poverty reports. And what these data journalists found is that between 2010 and 2014, in fact, prices had risen for Rwandan families, and therefore poverty could not have gone down. Also, the FT said that there had been a consistent attempt since 2015 to misrepresent results. In 2015, that's the year of the referendum to change the constitution, Kigali does not want to see a rise in poverty in the official statistics. In the end, the referendum was approved. That means that Kagame was able to run in 2017 and that he can now, in theory, run in 2024, 2029 and be in power until 2034.
Has there been any response from Rwanda on these findings from the Financial Times?
Yes, Rwanda denies the allegations. The World Bank officially denies the allegations. But what's interesting is that the FT on Tuesday published for the first time ever a letter which was written in 2015 by 5 employees from the World Bank, an internal letter that was sent to the directors of the World Bank. And this is what the letter says, according to the FT. Recent developments point to potentially serious reputational risks for the bank if its Rwanda operations continue in the current trajectory. And the authors voiced their concern over what they called the manipulation of official statistics and failure to provide reliable data openly. So this is bad news, this investigation from a prestigious newspaper for Kagame, because, you know, he's often accused of human rights violations, but that doesn't seem to bother him too much. He's always boasting about the economic development of his country. But if, in fact, this development is based on false statistics, well, that will really tarnish his legacy.
Thanks very much. And finally, on Tuesday, hundreds of fans of the late Coupe Décalé superstar DJ Arafat celebrated his life. A day earlier, the 33-year-old died suddenly in a motorcycle accident, devastating his fans all around the world. Many insisted at the time that Arafat couldn't have passed away, and they seem to be doing their best at that football stadium near his house to keep the sounds and his memory alive. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again. Take care.